fundamental weakness. It had a patriarchal view of God and a patriarchal view of the church. So I defined patriarchy in a specific way last time. As a system that creates winners and losers. You could call them the strong and the weak. You could say the strong dominate the weak. You could equally say the strong take care of the weak. So it doesn't matter whether it's negative or positive, it is still patriarchal. As long as you have unequal parties. As long as you have the strong and the weak. And we've tried to be specific in our definition of us being the same. We have the same rights. Christianity was not able to teach this to the fullest. Because it still taught that only the obedient have certain rights. Those that don't obey the church those that were not obedient would lose their rights. So my point is that because of this patriarchal view, Christianity was limited in its ability to extend equal rights. It could not teach equal rights for everyone. It also couldn't explain the end of the world in terms of everyone. So Christianity was not designed for a global world, for a highly integrated world, highly connected world, and a highly informed world. Where people know their inherent worth. And their inherent value. and therefore they strongly resist unequal treatment. So Adventism's role or purpose was to introduce universalism for adults. But we have tried to discuss why Adventism was not able to do that. They still had largely a Christian worldview. So it was left to this movement at the end to introduce full equality. So I've tried to summarize how I understand this development. And I've used the different stages of a human's growth. So we have the child phase, we have the difficult adolescent phase, and then the adult phase. An interesting point that has been raised by people that study humans and how humans think is that many people are physically adults, but psychologically are stuck in the adolescent phase. They have not really matured. They still don't know themselves because adolescents are people that are still trying to understand themselves. And in a spiritual sense, the struggle that I think we have had as God's people is living in a dispensation for adults, but not being sure of who we are, being halfway between children and adults. So it's not a criticism, it's just an observation. So most adults find it hard to live adult life to a large extent because they still think like teenagers. And a lot of us have struggled to understand the prophetic messages of our generation because we still think like Adventists. So I just found that interesting. My point was, Adventism was not able to introduce the universalism for adults, but it was able to progress from where most of Christianity left off. Then it was given to us to introduce a mature way of thinking about the world, of thinking about God, a mature way of thinking about salvation, and also about how to organize society. This is what I think is the significance of the shift that happened in 2024. We moved from an adolescent way of understanding equality to a mature adult way of understanding equality. This is in our understanding of law and our understanding of prophecy. I'm not talking about people's individual experiences. So moving on, there's a point I want to make about Christianity. If you remember the 2300-day prophecy, it's broken up into two major parts. There's 490 years for the Jews and 1810 years for the Gentiles. Another way to put it is the work of saving humanity was primarily driven through Jewish institutions. And then after 34 AD, it would begin to be managed through Christian institutions. So Christian ideas and Christian ways of organizing society would begin to impact the direction of the plan of salvation. So we had the Christian world. And prophetically, this time was from 34 AD to 1844. Christian ideas contributed to a lot of human progress. some of which I've spoken of in past presentations. We normally call this the separation of church and state, but I've called it the separation of knowledge seeking from the state. Meaning people could more freely explore knowledge. That was a contribution of Christianity to society. So the fact that you had two sets of institutions, the knowledge seeking institutions like the church, that could actually sometimes challenge the institutions of the state was a good thing. It limited kingly power. And another idea that Christianity contributed is the idea of the value of a human soul. The idea that we were created in the image of God. And that we had a good end, a good destiny, salvation. So that was a significant thing because a lot of the religions of the time did not emphasize the inherent value of a human soul. It prioritized the value of the king as the representative of God and the value of citizens or the nations or sorry, the nationals of that kingdom. Those that were not citizens did not have the same value. So Christianity came along and said the slave has the same inherent value as the free person. This is why Christianity was such an attractive religion at the start. And a lot of people were willing to convert to it. So it helped shape ideas that we have today of human rights, the worth of a human soul, checks and balances. So this is not just me saying this. Academics recognize Christianity's impact on the world. But that impact, as good as it was limited because there were weaknesses with the Christian model. And I've already discussed what the fundamental weakness was. A God that creates winners and losers. A God that has to be obeyed without question. It became tyrannical, and people got tired of it. So they rejected the Christian conception of God. And they shifted toward science, the Enlightenment, and a naturalistic worldview. So the post-Christian world is characterized by science, I'll just say liberal ideas, which are these ideas of religious and political freedoms. So freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, etc. And something called methodological naturalism. So methodological naturalism, in simple terms, is instead of understanding our world through the lens of God, let's understand the world through the lens of what we can observe, what we can see. So everything we see must have a natural explanation. I'm simplifying, but I would encourage you to go and research this on your own. So everything has a natural explanation. So in the Christian world, we said it's about God, the church. Um, I'll put priest in parentheses. And here I'll put providence. Everything that happens has a divine explanation. So everything has a divine explanation. That was the Christian world. So the priest became the most important figure. They were the elite of the time, and they determined what was true. In our history, or rather, in the post-Christian world, let me say it that way, which began many years ago, I marked 1798 for prophetic reasons because we have the rise of these new modern secular governments. So the elites of this post-Christian world are what Curtis called the technocrats. So people that are highly skilled in science, people that are highly skilled in economics, in media, politics. So they became the new elite. And to a large extent have defined for us what is true. So this post-Christian world, which prophetically I'm saying began in the history of 1798 to 1844, is what has shaped our thinking as people today. And it has created a lot of progress in different areas. But like Christianity, it also has its limits. And the crisis of our generation, we call it the Sunday law crisis, but other people will just say political crisis. What this crisis is revealing is the limits of this post-Christian framework. So I'll explain this further. Naturalism struggles to explain the inequalities within humanity. So naturalism relies on, I'll say, observable data. So statistics or other facts that can be seen or repeated. So it can be in economics, it can be in the area of artificial intelligence. Um, but especially human nature and human rights. This is my focus. And what I'm saying is there are limits to the usefulness of observable data or measurable data because there are many other variables that it can't easily account for. One major variable is environment. Environment affects the outcome of anything that we see. Many times in ways that we don't fully understand. So this is why when economists said the most efficient way to run the economy is to move manufacturing to cheaper countries, it could not account for what would happen in the Western countries. That people would lose, a lot of people would lose their jobs. A lot of people would not be willing to move to other places. A lot of people would get angry and be attracted to populist leaders. The data just wasn't going to show that. So they went forward confidently, saying, we know this is good for the country's balance sheets. But what the data overlooked is that it wasn't going to be good for people that had real lives. The same can be said about artificial intelligence. But today I want to focus on humans. So one thing that I hope we are aware of is that generally in the world, we have people that are for equal rights and people who are against equal rights. I am not saying either or is good or bad. I'm just saying this is their opinion or position. So I'll give an example of people that are for equality. Feminism or the feminist movement. We would all agree they're for equal rights. And an example of those against equality would be men's rights activists. The men's rights activist movement. So what I want to point out is that both these groups use the same arguments, or at least the same framework, to argue for or against equality. So both of them will generally use biology and evolution. If you read most of the feminist books that we like, most of them are evolutionists. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just identifying what is there. So some authors have been quoted a few times in our movement. Like Gina Rippon and her book, The Gendered Brain. Or Angela Saini. Angela Saini. And her book, The Patriarchs. If you've read these books, and there are more books, you know that these books are all based on an evolutionary origin story. So why am I bringing this up? Because I want us to see that there actually isn't much difference between Christianity and naturalism. The main difference is that one held on to God, the other one rejected God. So Christianity has this idea of predestination. or at least had it, which is another way of saying God selects the saved and the lost. There's nothing much you can do about this. Naturalism has this concept or idea of natural selection. So before I continue, I just want to acknowledge that the subject of naturalism is complex, it's big. And there are some aspects of evolution that are observable and correct. That's what allowed the idea to develop in the first place. So I'm not focusing on the correct bits, if I can call it that. Maybe correct is not even the way to put it. I'm focusing on the bits that are similar to the Christian framework. So, natural selection. Nature selects winners and losers. So, some will have good traits and others will have bad traits. And there's nothing you can do about it. And again, I'm not arguing how environment can impact our genetics. Because environment definitely impacts our genetics. I'm more concerned with how this framework is used. So there's certain there's certain attributes of humanity, like men being overly aggressive and tending to treat women badly. That one is a fact. It is a fact. A lot of men have treated women badly. But what a naturalist will say, or rather they'll ask, why is that the case? And the naturalist will say biology. A Christian, and I'm not necessarily talking about Adventism, we'll talk about the idea of original sin. I hope we're familiar with what original sin is. But this idea that because Adam sinned, we are all corrupted somehow and guilty of Adam's sin. So I'm not getting into it that much. But it's this idea that you've inherited a problem and you can't get rid of it. It's beyond your ability to do anything about it. So they'll say inequality is because of biology. So not everyone agrees necessarily with the statement in that community, but it's a pervasive enough argument for me to include it in my study. So those that are against equality will say, if I am aggressive as a man because of biology, this is evidence that I should be the leader or dominant. And then those that are arguing for equality or equal rights will say uh, men are aggressive or sexually adventurous because of their biology. And therefore, this should justify restrictions on men in order to protect women. So they're arguing for different things, different actions to be taken, but they're coming from the same place. And I'm saying that place is patriarchy. Because patriarchy is this system that divides people into winners and losers. So biology becomes the basis of worth. And this is not necessarily biology in a healthy way. It's biology as they understand it, of the strong and the weak. So they, like I said, they say harmful behavior. They'll simply say is human nature. So they'll speak about things like how we are highly intelligent beings, but our emotional nature is wicked. It's bad. So we need to repress our darker natures. I don't know if that sounds familiar. That I'll just say our intellect and will is good, and then I'm simplifying, but I'll just say emotions are bad. So emotions are our darker nature. And the Christian framework says a lot of our emotions should be repressed. Say, resist temptation. So I'm not trying to argue that people just do what they want or what they feel. I'm just saying there's a lot of similarities between the Christian framework and the naturalistic framework. And we'll find that some of the things said here, whether it's Christianity or naturalism, are not helpful. So darker nature should be repressed. So these ideas that I've shared on the left, predestination, original sin, that our intellect and will are good, our emotions are bad and should be repressed. This all began to be challenged in the Great Awakenings. And the Great Awakenings were saying people have agency, they have choice. Their destiny is in their own hands. And what I'm saying is, in this history of the post-Christian world, there also needs to be an awakening. There is an awakening. So there's a recognition that observable data has limits, that it's very difficult to come to a conclusion based on data that you observe, that people have certain traits biologically. because it is difficult to separate nature from nurture, from the environment. Our environment impacts us to the genetic level, to the biological level. And for most of our lives as humans, we have lived in a patriarchal environment. So we will naturally have patriarchal tendencies because we've been shaped by our environment. So there's a recognition of that even in the naturalistic world. So experts don't all agree with one another. So feminists will not all agree with one another. And the same in other fields of knowledge. And I'm saying that's a good thing because we should not just take what someone says because they are a technocrat, an expert. So I want to be very careful about this point because I want to be clear about what I'm saying. So if we talk about expertise, the experts, I'm saying there's two parts to it. There's the data, and then there's the interpretation. So I'm saying most of the times, the data is good, it's reliable. So it's good to have confidence in experts in fields. It's not possible for us to reinvent the wheel, to do everything from the start all the time. But the interpretation, it's sometimes good and sometimes unhelpful. And I'm saying we need to start recognizing that there's actually limits to this framework, to what it can explain or what it can do. You can't explain everything through natural means. Natural means that you can measure and observe and see. That's what I mean. So we cannot simply accept something because a journalist said it, or a scientist said it, or a feminist said it. So I want to move on to something related. Elder Tess. So we were living in this Christian worldview before Elder Tess. And what Elder Tess did is moved us from a Christian worldview I'll say to a post-Christian worldview. Because she wanted us to see the world as it is. So the unintended consequence of that is that we began thinking like the post-Christians. So we began thinking in a naturalistic way or in the naturalistic framework. Everything can have a natural explanation. And I want to suggest that that is the reason that people who used to believe that Jesus will actually return started questioning, will Jesus actually return? Because people used to believe this. Take time to think about it. But I'm saying, with a Christian mindset, where everything is a divine explanation and God is in control of everything, it's easy to believe in the second advent. But if someone comes and he says the Christian world doesn't exist anymore, the post-Christian world is what exists now. It's almost unavoidable that people will start thinking like the post-Christians. Everything must have a natural explanation. So will Jesus actually return? Will people actually be resurrected? Can the supernatural still be understood? So is anything supernatural? I want to suggest this was not the intention of her work. She wanted us to see reality, not necessarily to start thinking like how most people think. So when we say there's no more us and them, or no church and the world, I've tried to frame it as us versus them, or church versus the world. So my point is we are not fighting anymore. We're not enemies. We are all people, and we all have rights. But that doesn't mean we all think the same. And I'm saying in some respects, the movement is ahead of the world. Just like the post-Christians were ahead of the Christians towards the end of the 2300 days, this movement is ahead of the world as we get closer to the second advent. We are not ahead in terms of observable data. The very the rest of the world is very good at that. I'm saying the movement is ahead on interpretation of that data. The movement is ahead in terms of interpretation. So it is well worth being in this movement. If you remember in one of my earlier studies, I spoke about religion. And I said humanity has had two options for most of its history. The first one is a supreme being that controls everything. Including your life. The second one is no supreme being. I'll just say nature controls everything. This was necessary for human progress, but I'm saying the crisis we are in, all the inequality, the pain that we are experiencing and that we are seeing in the world, it's a demonstration of a demonstration of the limits of this second option. So the movement has developed a third option. A supreme being does actually exist, but operates under the law of equal rights. And this is a different model to what humanity has had before. So just as I'll say Christian thinking impacted the world, and post-Christian thinking also impacted the world after that. I'm saying the movement's post-naturalist thinking will also impact the world going forward. So I'll try and qualify or explain what I'm saying because I'm sure some people have thought about evangelism. I'm not talking about evangelism. So January 3, 2026 was the date when the liberal international order was rejected by the nation that was able to keep it going. And I'm saying what that communicated was that the post-Christian worldview was no longer helpful because people didn't want elites anymore leading them. They began to doubt liberal ideas. So there was already indications that this system is not, it's falling apart. So what this was meant to be a sign to us for was a further shift in thinking. So we need to stop thinking like the world. We should not have thought like the world in the first place. Because whether it's Christianity or post-Christianity, it's all patriarchy. It's all about winners and losers, the weak and the strong. So there's actually a shift in thinking that was meant to take place, or that has taken place. And I want us to become aware of that. We are the people that Ellen White was shown cast high above the world, walking in the path of equality. And I'm saying, in our understanding of equal rights, we are high above the world. we are ahead of humanity, the rest of humanity in our thinking. This is why the close of probation brings Jacob's time of trouble. That's why it brings mental anguish. It's because we have to change how we think. We have to change how we see the world. It's the purging of our earthliness, which is what Ellen White says happens at the close of probation. So earthliness is removed. And I'm saying we need to start thinking of the kingdom of equality with the mindset of equality. A lot of us think of the kingdom of equality with the mindset of patriarchy, the mindset of winners and losers, of good and bad. So we end up asking the wrong questions. Questions that are not helpful. Like, like if everyone is going to be saved, what about those people that refuse to repent? I'm saying that's an unhelpful question because in an environment or kingdom of equality, there is no such thing. We need to start changing how we think about people. We're out of time, so I want to bring this to a close on these few points. So we have to rethink the world and the people that live in the world. We need to start having a mature way of viewing these people. So in 2021, Elder Tess called us radical feminists. And many studies have been done that explain that this word radical means root. So it gives us a principle for how we interpret prophecy, how we analyze society, and how we understand people. We often judge people on the surface, but if we are radical feminists, we must get to the root of the problems. Rather than asking, what if that thief that was on the earth starts stealing in heaven? You should ask rather, what actually makes people thieves? How do they end up stealing? Get to the root of that problem. Why do people end up becoming murderers? Is it because of original sin? Is it because of biology? Meaning it's fixed and cannot be changed. Or it's something else. And if it's something else, then it should change how you look at that person. So equal rights is not just about changing laws. It's about changing how we understand human beings. My final point. In this mentally difficult dispensation, we are going to need a skill that formally began developing in 1989. That skill is called emotional intelligence. We will discuss this in a prophetic context in the future. But I want to introduce it now because emotional intelligence will help us to understand ourselves and others. It will help us to process difficult information. It will help us improve our relationships. It will also help us to understand people's underlying circumstances and accept the implications of equal rights under the law. So when I said in 2024, we had the introduction of universalism for adults, and we said the wall of separation was broken between the church and the world. This was just the beginning. And I said we have a unified prophetic model now. But there's another wall of separation that came to an end in 2026, which is the wall of separation between humans and other worlds, so heaven. And what that means in a nutshell, because what it meant in 2024 is that we need to see the same events in the same way, all impacting us. We don't have an internal event and an external event. An internal event and an external event. We're impacted by the same events. So we should be seeing things in largely the same way. So what this wall of separation that was broken down in January is talking about is that we need to start understanding ourselves and the world the way the rest of the universe sees the world and ourselves. How do people in an equal society look at what's happening with people on planet Earth? I can guarantee you they're not looking at us and they're saying there's good people and there's bad people. That's what patriarchal societies do. They're actually looking at us and they're saying these are people that are not having their needs met. People that do not know how to disagree healthily. People that need to bring down the temperature. That need to be shown that there's a better way of doing things. A better way of looking at each other. Which is why I think the second advent has to happen. Humanity must be given access to other worlds, to be shown that they are part of something bigger than themselves, and that there's actually a much better way of doing things. And so I believe the second advent will happen. But rather than having a king that's going to come and raise the temperature, and say, I'll kill those that I like, I'll kill those I don't like, and save those that I do like, we're actually going to have a second advent that lowers the temperature. A demonstration of a society that understands people, that knows how to get to the root of the problem, and is emotionally intelligent. That will actually know how to start bringing people together and have their needs properly met. Let's pray. Dear God, I am personally grateful that you raised up this movement, that we have the privilege to see things the way you see them, to actually see the world the way equal societies see our world. With compassion, with understanding, and with a desire to bring about reconciliation. For the nicest people in our world, and those that have been not so nice. And for this hope, I am grateful. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Blessing, for that wonderful presentation. And thank you all for joining in and listening in. Would like to thank the organizers of the camp meeting. And this marks the end of our camp meeting. And we can greet each other and straw faces.